So we're going to have a few minutes to take some questions. I have few here, but if you have more questions, please bring them. Somebody will be collecting them from the staff. Thank you. So the first question I have is, if I take Nuedexta, will I stop laughing forever, even at something funny? I love laughing.
The answer is no. It doesn't reduce normal emotions, only the emotions that are incongruous with how you feel. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is dedicated to Dr. Bedlag. Any thoughts on Protandem and its claim to help ALS?
Yeah, so Protandem is a nutritional supplement. It's actually made from ingredients from 5 different plants. And together, these activate an enzyme system called NRF2. There's a plausible mechanism by which that could help somebody with ALS. The best evidence so far that it does is one person, one of the 64 ALS reversals, who had his reversal when he started Protandem. He didn't do anything else. Now, I told you before, I don't know why these 64 people got better. That's something called an association. You know, one thing happened, then another thing happened. It doesn't mean the first thing caused the second, but it can generate a hypothesis. And so we actually just finished a clinical trial in which Protandem was one of 4 different supplements that we studied. It didn't seem to make anyone's ALS slow down, stop, or reverse. So it's no longer on my list of top supplements.
Thank you. How to go about participating in clinical trials? That could be for either one of you.
So the first thing is to find a trial. And there's just so many of them out there. I mean, you can try to find one yourself. There's trial search engines like clinicaltrials.gov. ALS TDI has something called the ALS Signal. I would say probably the easiest way to find a trial is to ask your clinic to say, could somebody sit down with us, during this clinic visit and help us find a trial that we match with. What I mean by that is they're going to ask you some questions. How long have you had ALS? How much function do you have? What's your breathing score? How far are you willing to drive? And that will help them figure out the list of things that you might qualify for. And then it really comes down to, once you know what you qualify for, picking the one that you feel is doable. Like a lot of times people will ask me, well, what's the best trial? The best trial is the one you can get into that you feel is feasible. Like if we knew which trial was most likely to work, we would drop every other trial. We would just focus all of our efforts on that. The reason we're doing so many trials is we don't know which one's going to work.
Next question is exercising good for people with ALS?
Sorry, I just wanted to go back to the previous question about trials. I also would add to that picking a trial that isn't going to be too burdensome on your energy and efforts. So if it's somewhere where you have to drive really far or go frequently and it takes out your energy for that day or the next day, it may not be for you. You want something that's low burden, that gives you hope and balances that with the amount of energy that it might take to participate.
Any comments, Jeffrey, about trials?
No, they're just hard to figure out which one to get in, so we could appreciate the help.
Yeah, no, I definitely think this is a service that every clinic should provide. I mean, it may not be the neurologist. Like, I consider that to be my role in my clinic, but not every neurologist in every clinic is going to consider that to be their role, but there should be somebody. And so a lot of times clinic will ask, ahead of time, what do you want to accomplish here today? And that can be one of the things on your list. I want somebody to sit down with me and tell me what my research options are.
Okay. The next question I have, did we answer the exercise one?
No, haven't. So yes, exercise is good for people with ALS. There's now numerous studies that suggest that people with ALS who exercise do better, they feel better, they live longer, compared to people who don't do any exercise. But there are many questions that remain about the exact type of exercise and the amount of exercise. So up until recently, we were telling our patients, look, we want you to find something that you feel like you can do safely every day, and We want you to start with less of it than you think you can do and gradually build up. And if you get to a point where the next day you're in pain or you're exhausted, that's too much, you have to titrate it back down. It's still what we do for exercises of the limbs. But as I said in my talk, we now have these very specific respiratory strength training exercises that I think every clinic should be using, because 2 different clinical trials have shown that people who do those have improvements in breathing, coughing, and a dramatic slowing in the loss of bulbar function.
Thank you. Next question is, I've been informed that I have a mutated gene of unknown significance. What would a timeline for the scientific community to be able to examine for genes like mine? Is there a database collecting other PALs with common unfamiliar gene mutations?
Yeah, so I think most likely this person has something which is called a VUS, a variant of unknown significance. So as we do larger panels of genes, like let me take a step back and say every single person with ALS should be offered the opportunity to have their genes examined now. Because we have a drug that's a home run for one genetic form of ALS, we have another one right behind it. We have research trials that are looking for specific genetic subsets. Many people want to know why they got ALS. Many family members want to know what's my risk. Genetic testing helps with all that. Genetic testing is easy. Anybody can do it anywhere in the United States, and it's free. We can look at 33 genes now, and it doesn't cost a penny, because the companies that we use have entered into arrangements with pharmaceutical companies who are developing therapies with the hope that by identifying more people with genetic mutations, there'll be more candidates for those drugs. So it's a win-win. VUS means it's never been seen. It means it's not the typical pattern that we see in a gene, and no one has ever seen this pattern before in any database that exists in the world. It's never been shown to be a cause of ALS. It's never been shown to be benign. The only way we'll figure out what each VUS means is by continuing to look at new studies that do genetic testing in all fields, because sooner or later, somebody else is going to identify that same VUS in either an 80-year-old person who's perfectly healthy, and then we'll know it's just benign, or in a family that all has ALS, and we'll know it's a new cause of ALS. But in the meantime, all we can do is wait. The companies that do the genetic testing, they help us monitor for those VUSs, and so some people in my clinic who had a VUS 4 years ago, I got a report from the company recently that said, oh, by the way, this is now considered to be pathogenic. I mean, it's a cause of the ALS, because there's a new study that says that. So if you work with the right companies, they'll partner with you to get you that new information, but it can take time.
Okay. It looks like all the questions are coming to him. I'm sorry. No offense. Has there ever been a C9 gene ALS reversal?
No, none of the 64 ALS reversals have C9, but 2 of the ALS reversals do have other genes that cause their ALS. SQSTM1 was one of them, and the other one was FUS. So I think sooner or later I'll find one.
What are your thoughts on Metformin for C9 ALS?
Can you spell that word for me?
Metformin.
Okay, Metformin. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a mechanism by which that drug could specifically help people with C9. What it does is it knocks down the production of these things called dipeptide repeat proteins. It's been in a clinical trial at the University of Florida for at least a couple of years, and I haven't seen any results. So what I tell people is, look, if you have diabetes and C9, that's probably a reasonable thing to treat maybe 2 problems. Probably need something for your diabetes, and so I'd much rather see people use that than some of those GLP-1 agonists that we talked about as being harmful. But beyond that, if you don't have diabetes, we just don't know. We don't know enough about it. I mean, it is pretty safe, but personally, I think there might be more exciting things to self-experiment with, like some of the things I mentioned at the end of my talk.
Okay. This might be for both of you, for either of you. What do we need to make functional medicine approach reliable and effective for most or many?
I think first, I would say most neurologists aren't as familiar with functional medicine, and so I think first and foremost we need to partner more closely with them in our clinics to understand what they do and how we can make recommendations that align and partner and collaborate with them rather than have opposing recommendations.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, what I love about functional medicine is the outside the box approach, the holistic approach. What I don't love is I feel like a lot of times functional medicine docs don't really have much knowledge of ALS. So what you said, I think, is perfectly appropriate. Like, I'll have a patient who says, I went to this functional medicine doc and they diagnosed me with aluminum toxicity. And I said, aluminum tox? What do they measure in aluminum? Why did they measure your aluminum? They said, well, they just looked at everything as a possible cause of ALS. Well, aluminum doesn't cause ALS. There's no evidence whatsoever that any heavy metal causes any case of ALS. And so we should start by making sure that we're only testing for things where there's some plausible relationship between that thing and the ALS. And then the other thing that bothers me about them is they tend to use assays that really have never been verified as accurate. So people will come to me with these reports, and they're often from the same companies. And it says right on the last page of the 70-page report, this report has never been cleared by the FDA. It should never be used to diagnose, treat, or monitor any medical condition. And yet that's what functional medicine docs are using to determine treatment plans. Like, let's get our heads together and decide what are we going to test for and what labs are we going to use to test for those things. Let's not use labs that have never been verified as measuring anything accurate.
Now I have a question for Jeff. Which was your favorite mile at the Chicago Marathon?
Oh, I think it was around 23 when I spotted the ALS United cheer squad.
Thank you. Another question for, I believe, Dr. Bedlock, or maybe Dr. Kramer. How do you get Qalsody or threshold?
Yeah, so we're talking about the medicine tofersen Qalsody. So it starts with the genetic testing, and you have to have the SOD1 genetic mutations that cause ALS. That's the first step. And then your doctor has to order it. Your doctor probably has to fight with insurance to get it. They may have to fight with their institution to be able to give it, because the additional barrier to this medicine, it's not a pill. I mentioned it was an intrathecal injection. That means we have to bring you in to our institutions every month. We have to get a needle between your backbones, and we have to drip this medicine into your spinal fluid. So it's quite difficult, but I personally believe it's worth fighting for because I think it's our first home run.
I think this next question is kind of related to what you just mentioned. So how does one change their gut microbiome? Can I improve it without fecal transplant?
Yeah, there are lots of ways to change your gut microbiome. Change your diet, change your exercise habits, change your stress level, probiotics. The problem is the only person that I know of who's done any work to look at what a good and bad gut microbiome in ALS might be is our team at Duke. And the things that we've identified, the simplicity and the P. vulgaris, there is no strategy that I know of to simplify your microbiome or raise the P. vulgaris level. So the only things I know of that might be able to do it are fecal transplants and maybe a new probiotic that we're building at Duke. Like, there's no existing probiotic that does it. I've scoured them. And what I would caution people about is we think that the gut microbiome is primarily messed up in people who are progressing very fast with their ALS. And so sometimes people come to me and they say, I'm going to go do a fecal transplant. I say, but your progression rate is only half of what the average person with ALS is. You probably have already optimized your gut microbiome. All you can do with this is possibly mess it up and make it more complex and knock out your P. vulgaris and speed up your progression. Like, it really has to be done much more scientifically, I think. I think it's probably premature now for folks to try to change that on their own. I think We need labs that can accurately measure the simplicity and the amount of this P. vulgatus strand that we found, and then we need a reliable way to change it. And we're trying to find all that, but it's going to take some time.
We'll take a couple more questions, and I think we should be done. What supplements do you put Bulbar patients on?
So in my clinic, I first talk about Nuedexta, because I think that's the one that's really shown improvements in speaking and swallowing and handling secretions. Again, there has to be some pseudobulbar affect, but usually we can have a conversation where we say, are you sure there's absolutely no extra laughing or no extra crying that is unusual for you? Well, maybe. And then we can put down pseudobulbar affect, and we can usually get insurance to pay for it. If there's absolutely none, we just can't get it. But I usually can get it. You know, other things to think about with that medicine, it has a little bit of quinidine in it. And so quinidine is something used by cardiologists to regulate the heart rhythm. It specifically acts on one part of the EKG called the QT interval. And so if a person has a history of something called prolonged QT syndrome, or they're taking medicines that prolong the QT syndrome, we have to be careful. We usually have to do a baseline EKG, make sure the QT interval is okay, give a test dose of Nuedexta in the clinic, 3 hours later, repeat the EKG and make sure the QT hasn't changed, and then we're good to go.
What are your thoughts about taking flaxseed oil for omega-3 fatty acid or omega-3 fatty acid?
Yeah, I think there's a theory by which that could help a person with ALS. I think it's extremely unlikely to be harmful. But I mean, when I weigh like what the next best thing for each person is that comes to see me, there's a lot of things that have more evidence that they will help than that. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but it wouldn't be one of the top 10 things I would reach for if I had ALS.
I have one more sheet, has 3 questions, and then we're done. Does the device EMST 75/150 expiratory muscle strength trainer is what is used for respiratory strength training?
Yeah, so there's actually 2 devices. One is for expiratory, breathing out. One is for inspiratory, breathing in. So the E is for expiratory. There's another one that has an I for inspiratory. But I would always encourage people to talk to their team. Each team usually has somebody who's going to educate patients about how to use these things and monitor them. So I know some clinics it's respiratory therapy. My clinic it's actually speech therapy that does that. But it's going to go much better if you do it in partnership with somebody who's got a lot of experience troubleshooting these devices.
So this next statement is a request, not a question. Website to sign up for CNOBI ALS. Please, pretty please.
Yeah, the website is called Wide Trial, WIDETRIAL. And Wide Trial is an organization that's run by someone that I've known about in ALS for many years. His name is Jess Rayborn, and he's been trying to figure out how to get more experimental drugs in the hands of more patients. So this is the first expanded access program that he's been part of, but he's partnering with Bjorn Oscarsson from the Mayo Jacksonville, and they're using this drug, which is called Ibutalast, which has some pretty good phase 2 data and is now in a phase 3 study. So I personally think it's promising enough to not only have participated in the trial, but to put a whole bunch of my patients on it in the expanded access program.
Excellent. One last one. Yes?
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
So first of all, Doc, I want to thank you for ALS Untangled. That is so helpful. Yeah, and when we discovered that, it took a lot of the guesswork out of what to use. What I wanted to ask you about was there was a recent newspaper article that somebody sent me about a study that was done by some immunization group in New York City in conjunction with Columbia University about the role of the immune system in ALS. And I've always felt like my ALS is some kind of interior body response. And I even asked my neurologist, and I'd like you to weigh in on this, about giving me a bunch of prednisone and shutting down my immune system and restarting it. Have you ever looked at anything like that? And do you know anything about this immune study that they just hinted at?
I think I know which one you're talking about. I think it was mostly a preclinical study done like in models of ALS where they were looking at immune complexes. But there's a ton of information to suggest that parts of the immune system are out of whack in people with ALS. I think one thing that I certainly didn't understand when I started, the immune system is incredibly complex. It's not like too much or too little immune function. There's thousands of parts to it. And we have actually tried to manipulate a lot of the different parts to it without success, including prednisone. We wrote an ALS Untangled about that. It doesn't seem to do anything. I personally think the most exciting thing I've seen comes from a guy named Stan Appel, who's been in this, believe it or not, longer than I have. He's in his 90s and still going strong. So it gives me hope. But he's found that there's a problem with a type of cell called T cells, T lymphocytes. Specifically that there's an imbalance between this type of cell called T regs and T helper cells. And so he's got a therapy, you may have heard of this group called Koya. They've got a treatment that they think boosts the number of T regs that's going into a phase 2 trial. But it's kind of interesting, it might actually link back to the gut microbiome, because the gut microbiome can control parts of the immune system, including the T cell ratio. So I just wonder if we're all going to wind up in the same place eventually.
Okay, before I ask the last question, I want to thank everybody for the beautiful handwriting. It was easy for me to read. I was worried about that part. Where can I find information on respiratory strength training?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, if you just Google it, AI will put together a summary with pictures and videos and links to articles. My colleague Emily Plowman, Plowman, is the one who was the lead author on the 2 trials that I mentioned. But again, your clinic should have information about this, and somebody on the team, should be the one that's got the devices and shows you how to use them in clinic and follows up with you to make sure that they're working okay. It's a hard thing to just get started on your own.
Can I comment on that? So when I went to Mayo's for my clinic, they told me about the trial because you heard doctors say 50% improvement. They're like, it's too good to keep it a secret. So I said, what's that device called? Oh, it's an EMSD 150. And I Googled it, and it's made by Aspire, and it cost $50. So I ordered one, and I'm not in the trial, but I'm doing it every day.
Thank you for this input. Before I pass it over to Kendra, I want to thank everybody for being here today, for all the great questions, but more importantly, for all our presenters, for Dr. Bedlack for making the schlep from North Carolina, Dr. Kramer coming from Rush all the way, and Jeff for coming from Peoria. Appreciate you all.